In the photo, a young Sioux woman from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. The portrait is by Jesse H. Bratley, a teacher who worked in Native schools between 1893 and 1903. As he moved through different communities, he recorded customs and daily life, creating a collection that reveals Native culture during a period of intense change. In 1900, the Greater America Exposition in Omaha made room for indigenous representatives who presented the practices and voices of their peoples. Among them was Ironhawk, an Oglala Lakota leader of the Sioux Nation. His participation as a delegate marked the event and signaled, amid the rapid changes in the United States, the insistence of Lakota culture on being heard and respected. In Montana at the beginning of the 20th century, Chief Lewison led the Flathead people. In 1908, N.A. Forsyth photographed him for Underwood and Underwood. The image, more than a portrait, holds a moment of leadership and continuity, a face that connects collective memory, territory, and the persistence of a story that has crossed generations. At the turn of the 19th century, L.A. Huffman sought more than images. He wanted moments that would endure. He worked at a company dedicated to stereoscopic photographs, then a novelty for creating a sense of depth. In 1880, he made a commanding portrait, Spotted Eagle, leader of the Itazipcho Lakota tribe, also called Sans Arc. In the interior of Arizona, Canyon de Chelly holds the voice of a people. A Navajo woman weaves sheep's wool, turning threads into rugs and blankets that cross generations. The scene is fixed by Carl Moon, a photographer, painter, and writer, who, in the early 20th century, sought to record the life and heritage of Native American peoples. In a photographic record from the late 19th century, a young woman of the Ute people faces the lens. Coming from the mountains of the western United States, she carries a language with nomadic roots. The dark dress, with fringes and embroidery, marks identity. The image is part of a collection that seeks to carefully document the life and culture of Native peoples in that period. A historic photo brings together two Oglala Lakota leaders of the Sioux and a U.S. officer. On the left, American Horse, an interpreter and scout who collaborated with the operations. On the right, Red Cloud, a chief who led the war for the Powder River Territory. Between them stands Frank North, in uniform, organizer and commander of the Pawnee Scouts, allies of the Army. In the image, Bird Wild Hog, also known as Hedgehog, a member of the Cheyenne, faces the camera. The portrait, made in 1890 by Christian Barthelmess at Fort Keogh, Montana, records an Army scout whose path is linked to that of his father, a Northern Cheyenne leader in the 1879 escape, a milestone of persistence in defending traditions under heavy pressure. In 1880 in the United States, L.A. Huffman photographed in Montana a member of the Crow Nation. Peoples of the region's plains and mountains maintained ties to hunting. In the portrait, he wears the dress of his culture and holds a weapon, highlighting the work that provided food for the group, bringing down buffalo, elk, and other game. Known among the Cree as Kezkayo and in English as Bob Small, he moved between Canada and the United States. It is said the nickname came from a Q haircut, rare among indigenous people at the time. In 1906, he went to Butte, Montana, where he was photographed by F.E. Pizzo, a portraitist of Native peoples. The image remained as a record of that passage. On the banks of the Little Bighorn near Billings, Montana, a young Crow adjusts his dress before joining a large gathering that brings together peoples of the Great Plains. It is the beginning of the 20th century. The Crow Indian Fair emerges, an annual fair that pulses with traditions, celebrates gatherings, and keeps alive the stories that span generations. Keatadi was born among the Laguna in the American Southwest. Her name held the voice of her ancestors, but documents record Loti or Lotaatsi, forms assigned by Spanish and American colonizers. In 1904, she lived in Laguna Pueblo, New Mexico, adjusting her identity to the changes that were coursing through the community. Between names and meanings, Mato-Whitkotko, also called Mata-Whitko or Mato-Whitko, belonged to the Yanktonai tribe of the Dakota people. In his language, the name refers to brown bear, crazy, or foolish brown. In 1872, he was portrayed by Alexander Gardner, famous for recording the Civil War and photographing Native leaders in Montana in widely circulated portraits. In N.A. Forsyth's image, a group of indigenous people faces an automobile, a novelty brought by European colonizers. The scene goes beyond curiosity. It marks the friction between ancestral practices and a machine that inaugurates other routes, foreshadowing deep changes in the daily life and relationships of these communities, opening a frontier of overlapping times. In 1891, John C.H. Grable captured a slice of Lakota daily life. Against the background of the northern plains, tipis rise in a circle at the camp. Made with wooden frameworks and covered with hides or canvas, these shelters were practical. They were set up and taken down quickly, allowing people to follow the seasons and the path of the hunt. Around 1920, the photo shows a Kiowa woman, a people of the Great Plains. She wears a skin garment, a beaded necklace, an embroidered belt, and a scarf. It is not just clothing. Each piece speaks of belonging, technique, and collective memory. By uniting form and function, the clothing reveals how the Kiowa preserve identity and celebrate their art in daily life and in rituals. In the image appears Sitting Bull, a Lakota leader of the Hunkpapa division, remembered for his resistance to United States policies on the Great Plains. The portrait, made around 1880 by David Francis Barry, is part of the series in which the photographer recorded people and settings of the West in the 19th century. Facing the camera, he condenses a story. Montana, the early 20th century. On the Crow Reservation, an artisan bends over a hide teepee. In traditional dress, he prepares brushes and dips them into pigments of plants and minerals. With each stroke, ancient stories emerge. The gesture is everyday, but it announces the persistence of a culture that asserts its roots in the small rites of daily life. In 1870, a young Iroquois woman posed for a record that would cross eras. The photo, made by Richard Throssell, an artist of Cree origin adopted by the Crow tribe, is part of his mission to document Native peoples. More than a portrait, the image condenses the strength of the Great Lakes Confederation and leaves clues to a story still pulsing. A member of the Oglala Lakota Nation, one of the 7 Sioux peoples of the northern United States Plains, Garnett posed in 1877 for Charles Milton Bell, a photographer of Native leaders. In the portrait, he displays a feather headdress, a beaded necklace, a fur coat, and a sacred pipe, signs of his heritage and role in the community. The record preserves the memory of his people. On the plains of the American Midwest lived Lusaku Rikalahaw of the Pawnee Nation. His name evoked a moment of the day, sacred for its connection to the sun. In 1869, the Jackson brothers portrayed him in Omaha, Nebraska, in a project that recorded indigenous life and the landscapes that shaped the West in transformation. The image preserved a rite of light and memory. In 1889, a young Apache woman faces the lens of D.B. Chase, who traveled the Southwest portraying Native peoples. While the click freezes her face, history moves. The U.S. government pushes borders, takes territories, and imposes assimilation. Between the portrait and the pressure, her community fights to keep memory, land, and ways of living. At the end of the 19th century, more than 500 indigenous representatives gathered in Omaha for the United States Indian Congress. Among them, American Horse, a Sioux chief, posed for Adolph F. Muir under the direction of Frank A. Reinhardt. The photograph situates this gathering in 1898. when various nations exhibited their cultures at the Trans-Mississippi and International Exposition. Among the Cheyennes, 6 military societies structured collective life. Among them, the Dog Soldiers, or Dogmen, took on the guardianship of order and defense, following the Council of 44 Chiefs, renewed each decade. The Brotherhood gained strength when Sweet Medicine, in a cave in the Black Hills, received 4 sacred arrows. In 1879, John K. Hillers recorded 2 young Hopi women in front of an adobe wall in Arizona. Ceremonial clothing, necklaces, and silver earrings signal identities passed down from generation to generation. The photo is part of a series of 72 images from the Bureau of American Ethnology's expedition to the Southwest, inviting observation of how Hopi life preserves and reinvents its traditions.